So this is in furtherance of my last video. If you watch that, you'll know I've been watching Mike Tyson videos throughout the night. Well, I've just watched the Andrew Golota fight from 2000. That was a particularly controversial fight, and I'll put a link to it underneath. It's quite thought-provoking because it was a very, very ugly outcome. Basically what happened was, at the beginning of the third round, end of the second round, don't know exactly, Andrew Golota, decent Polish heavyweight, not a great fighter, but above average, good contender. He quit, and he basically just wanted to walk out of the ring. Now that's something that's very, very unusual in professional boxing, and in my opinion only exceptional circumstances would bring that about. There's of course a famous no mask fight with Roberto Duran and Sugar Ray Leonard in the 80s. That's another example, but this is one. And what basically happened was, Golota's corner, including I think Lou Duffer, I think I recognise him. He's a real aggressive sort of corner man, an old man now, but I may be wrong about that, by the way. It just looked like Lou Duffer, but don't quote me on that. They were verbally abusing him, telling him what the fuck is he doing, this sort of stuff. Golota was clearly very distressed. He clearly wanted to get out of there. Tyson looked really unsettled by the whole thing as well. Tyson looked pissed off, like he wanted the fight to continue. But basically it got very ugly. As Golota was walking out, he was being accompanied by security, of course. Some elements of the crowd got very ugly and they threw things at him. At one point the red liquid splattered over Golota. It looked like some sort of, I don't know, I guess it was tomato juice or something, but really ugly scenes. Anyway, I'll put a link to the fight. Someone's uploaded that so you can judge for yourself, but I want to comment a bit about this. By the way, it was 2000 this fight took place, so it was towards the end of Tyson's career. It was one of his later fights. Like I said, I don't think any fighter would quit without good reason, professional fighter. So clearly Golota thought something was going on there, and I tend to go towards the view that Golota seriously feared for his health. It was later revealed actually Tyson had done serious damage, and had Golota continued that fight, there's a real chance he could have been in a hospital that night, or even worse. Nobody knows their own health better than themselves. So Golota clearly feared that his health was in serious danger there. This is a tough man, a professional boxer, right? And Golota's had plenty of fights. To his credit, he had the guts to step into the ring, albeit a few years later, but he went back into the ring after that ordeal. So this is not a man who lacks heart. That's a lot of rubbish. There's this term heart in boxing. It's not a term I particularly like, but basically if you're not a boxing fan, it means how much determination you supposedly have. Now Golota's last fight was last year, so clearly that ordeal didn't make him quit permanently. But after it he didn't fight for 3 years. His next fight after that was against Brian Nix, who I'm not familiar with, but you know, for him to quit like that, Andrew Golota has fought guys like Michael Grant, Orlin Norris, Jesse Ferguson, Tim Witherspoon, Corey Sanders, Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe, all very notable fighters, especially Lennox Lewis and Riddick Bowe. So no one can accuse Andrew Golota of lacking heart. Therefore, to quit in that fight, he must have had a pretty good reason. Now, from the fans' perspective, I can understand frustration insofar as they have paid to watch the fight. But when you look at the circumstances, basically what it comes down to is a man's life versus whatever it is, $50, $90. Well, I guess for a Tyson fight would be more than that, $150 ticket. Yeah, it's a fair bit of money, but you're matching that up against potentially a man's life. So to me, this is something that really makes me question the sport. And I don't want to be a hypocrite. I follow the sport. And looking at amateur boxing, there's a lot of things I like about the sport, and I'm not trying to run down the sport. I'm not going to be a hypocrite. I follow the sport. I watch fights. There's a lot of things I like about the sport. But when I see shit like this, and thankfully it isn't that common, but when I see this sort of shit happening, it really makes me cringe, because that sort of behaviour is just animalistic. And really, when you think about it, it pretty much makes boxing modern day gladiatorial games. When you think about it, there's really not much difference, other than the fighters are not slaves and they don't have weapons. That's really the only difference. I guess Roman gladiators weren't paid, that's another factor. But when you think of the health risks involved in professional boxing, it's not exaggerating, I think, to say it is like basically modern day gladiators. So the fact that in the 21st century people could treat a fighter like that, it sickens me to the core. And you know, I just feel disgusted watching it. Like I say, I can understand the fans being frustrated, and if it was a case of Golota just quitting because he couldn't be bothered to fight Tyson anymore, then yes, that would be unprofessional. But I don't think a man like Andrew Golota would do that, looking at his resume. So clearly he thought something was seriously wrong. Now if you are going to argue that, oh, it's a tough sport, he should fight until the end, then you're just a sadist. In the end of the day, it is a sport. Boxers should not be like soldiers. This is not war, right? Soldiers go into war knowing there's a chance they could die. The boxers are in a tough sport, they know there's risks involved, but the purpose of a boxing match is not to kill your opponent. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to win the fight. And, you know, pat the other guy in the head at the end. So if a fighter really believes that his health is in danger, you have to be a sadist, really, to argue that if he really thinks that, then he should continue regardless. Now, it's different if you, like, a guy has a broken rib or something that isn't a life-threatening injury. Yeah, sure. A tough fighter should continue. And if it's a world title fight, you know, a fighter shouldn't be put off with a bit of blood or something like that. But if that fighter really believes there is an injury that could potentially end his life, then maybe Golota should have handled it slightly differently. Maybe he should have went down or just sat in his stool or something. But I think, looking at that crowd, they would have treated him like shit regardless. And as for the corner, fuck them. I mean, clearly they were just in it for the money. They had no compassion for their man whatsoever. But that crowd, I just felt sickened. And I don't think it's a case of me being too sensitive. I fully know boxing is a tough sport. I have no problem with seeing blood and injuries, no problem at all. But I do have a problem seeing that sort of animalistic mentality among so-called fans. And those people are just fucking animals. I'm sorry for the language, but I feel very strongly about this. And I really hope when, you know, it was discovered that Golota did have serious injuries, I hope every last one of them held their heads in shame for throwing missiles at the man. I mean, again, it comes on an argument. Would any of them do it? Step into a ring with Tyson? Of course they wouldn't. They're cards. Real boxing fans respect fighters. That's the bottom line. Yes, fighters need to respect fans as well and recognise the fact they've paid money to watch the fight. Of course. But ultimately, if you're coming down an argument between a man's life and a $150 ticket, you'd have to be a pretty much sadistic to try and argue that the ticket is more important. Let's get real here. So, the shit that Golota received there was just ugly. And, you know, it says something about the man that he actually did step back into the ring. Yeah, 3 years later, but he stepped back into the ring. And that says something about Andrew Golota's spirit, as far as I'm concerned. So just shame on the people who threw things at him. And just, I really wish some boxing fans would just fucking think. Because that sort of behaviour is just... I saw people on the video saying, well, he's a professional boxer, he should stick to it to the end, that sort of thing. But I really don't think a man like Andrew Golota would have quit that early on without thinking to himself that there was something seriously wrong. I really don't think so. And I really wish people would consider that. So, yeah, watch the fight for yourself. I'll put a link. Let me know what you think. This fight was 14 years ago, but there's been similar things since, and there's been similar things before that. Really, as far as I'm concerned, some boxing fans are just trash. They're just really, really low-life people. And for them to treat another human being in that way, and think they can get away with it, or think that it's okay just because they're a professional sportsman. In the end of the day, yes, they're professional sportsmen, but they're also human beings. And to treat another human being in that way, it's disgusting.